Welcome everyone to our next conversation with Louisa Moats and Michelle Hosp. Today we're going to be discussing assessment for word reading difficulties in online and hybrid environments. It's part of a series of conversations we've held with experts around addressing word reading difficulties, including dyslexia. And we're so excited to have both Louisa and Michelle with us today. I'm Monica Ng. I am the Vice President of Education Programs at Pivot Learning, and I'm joined by my colleague, Carrie.
Welcome, everybody.
Carrie is the Director of Literacy from CORE. So excited to be joined today by Dr. Moats.
I also wanted to take this opportunity to introduce our other special guest, Dr. Michelle Hosp.
So in this series, we've been talking to trusted experts about how to support students with word reading difficulties, including dyslexia. And so, Louisa, I'm going to start by asking, is it still important to collect reading data now in the midst of everything that we're going through? And what are the dangers of taking what some people are calling a data vacation?
Well, taking a data vacation is not at all advised. I think the arguments people are making for taking data vacations is that they're going to find out a lot of bad news and they don't want the bad news. However, we can't solve problems that we haven't measured and identified when it comes to education. So even though it's likely to be bad news in terms of COVID regression, COVID decline, or as one of our principals here said, a missed year of education, we need to know what's happening in order to engage in some innovative problem solving and address the needs that kids have.
I agree actually with Louisa that people are afraid of the bad news, right? So I also think that schools are a little bit of deer in the headlights where they don't quite know what to do with the information, and it's very frustrating and overwhelming for them. However, if we really think about it, it's actually more important now than ever before to be collecting data. So for example, in the middle of the year, the reason why we want to collect the data is we need to know where all of our kids are on specific reading skills like phonics, because then we can take every minute of instruction and make it count. These kids still have half a year of instruction that's going to happen. And if we can better inform where we need to focus by using good, reliable data, then we absolutely should be collecting it, because it allows us to kind of get rid of the noise of should I do this or should I not do that, but knowing what we should do to help kids develop their reading skills. So the other reason why we should be collecting data is a lot of schools are going to be, thinking about summer reading programs. And there's going to be a lot of kids, because of how this year has gone, that are going to need that extra help. So if we collect the data now, and particularly in the spring, if we have good, reliable reading data, particularly on word reading skills like phonics, using something like Key Phonics or other really good, reliable phonics reading inventories, then in summer school, we can group these kids instructionally and really make a difference. I mean, summer school is typically only around 3 weeks, but if we know which specific skills these kids need, then summer school becomes a much more robust and meaningful program, because we can really target those specific skills. The other reason to collect data is we need to know what happened this year so that we can plan for next year. These teachers going into next year need a heads up. They really need to know what skills need to be backfilled, particularly in reading, because the skills are really on a progression. And if kids are missing skills and it's not typically taught in the next grade, those teachers in the next grade need a heads up, because they're now going to be responsible for teaching those skills. So it's really important for gathering the data now to know what we need to be doing instructionally, to really be thinking about our summer reading programs, and really be thinking about, where are we starting? What's going to happen next year? And where do we possibly need to change what we have typically done in the past?
So ideally, assessment informs instruction, but often in our work with schools and districts, we see we're missing that mark. And so what are some of the barriers to using data to improve instruction, and how can we overcome them?
Well, there seem to be some common barriers. One is that sometimes there's too much data and random data, and it doesn't agree in terms of normative reference points or skills surveyed and so on. And it's just a big mess and teachers don't know what to do about that. So one barrier is that the data don't focus enough on teaching itself and what you need to know about a student in order to teach them. Another barrier, and I guess this is a barrier, is that even if you have numerical data that is pretty good, things like where the student is on a spelling survey, for example, you need to know more than what the numbers are expressing in order to really be an expert at pinpointing what to say and do with the student. And I'm thinking about, for example, being able to look at reading and spelling errors and interpret them from the standpoint of linguistic analysis. I don't know of any survey that does that for you. You have to, because any test or any quiz or any measurement is merely a sample of a behavioral area or a cognitive area that we're interested in addressing in instruction. So you have to use that sample judiciously and make some judgments about what is driving the student's behavior. And the numbers won't tell you that. You also have to use your judgment to know whether or not the student was really taking the test or was distracted and not putting in the effort and those kinds of things. The data don't tell you that. You, as the instructor or the clinician, need to bring interpretive knowledge to the task to have it be as useful as it can be.
And have you seen schools or districts that have been successful in bridging that for teachers, creating that connection for teachers?
Well, oh yes, and I think it has everything to do with really thorough and deep professional development that gives teachers the lenses through which to look at student reading and writing behavior, and that helps them pinpoint exactly what is going on when a student doesn't get it or confuses one thing with another. And then you don't have to waste time doing things that are not on the mark. You can zero right in on what the student needs to have explained and or what the student needs more practice with.
There's a couple things that really come to my mind for this. I think one thing we need to make sure is, I think sometimes the barrier for collecting data is that schools are already collecting a lot of data and teachers don't know what to do with it. They don't know what questions the data is asking. They feel overwhelmed. They feel underprepared. So I think a lot of it actually, teachers have to have the skills and the confidence to be able to respond and make instructional changes. So I really think that that's one thing that's key. Beyond that, I think teachers really have to understand that purpose of why they're collecting the data in the first place. Often, when we screen kids, it's already confirming what teachers already know, that this kid's at risk. And often if you're thinking about some of the assessments like computer adaptive that take a long time, that data gets stale pretty quickly. So it's not fresh. And when we think about data and things that teachers really should be spending time doing, it should be tied to that specific question. So an example would be, if I'm a teacher, one of the questions I might have for my class is the class actually demonstrating mastery of phonics skills that I've taught them? And so not that are they at risk for phonics skills, but these are the skills I taught. I want to know, do they have their short vowel sounds? Do they know are controlled? What about vowel teams? Because that is the information I can then use to drive my instruction. Another question I would have is, so if the kid is having difficulty, what are the specific phonics skills that they need help with? So beyond even just vowel teams, which vowel teams? There's lots of vowel teams. Which I know the kid is struggling with vowels, which vowels should I be spending time teaching? And then also monitoring their progress, right? So then is the student getting better given the instruction I'm giving them? That assessment really needs to be tied specifically to the skills I'm teaching. So when I think about that, not to beat my own drum, but Key Phonics was built to actually be able to be given quickly and efficiently to answer those questions, to really give teachers immediate feedback and easy consumable reports so that they can understand exactly which phonics skills their class is mastering, an individual group of kids is being able to be successful or unsuccessful with, and then that individual student who, keeps us up at night because we just don't know what to do and we know that they're struggling and everyone cares and the kid is trying. The best thing we can do is have some really good diagnostic information to get in there and teach the specific skills that the kid needs. But it can't kill us. We can't do that in spite of teaching. We have to do that along with our teaching. So the assessments we give really need to be quick and efficient and answer those specific questions, give us consumable information and data reports so that we can do what we know helps kids learn, and that's teach. It's not testing more, it's testing smart and then teaching the things that kids need to be proficient readers. I always tell schools and teachers in particular, if you don't know what question that assessment is going to answer for you, meaning what you're going to do with that data, don't give it, just teach. And I think if districts looked at that, of what are the questions we need to understand about all of our kids and their reading skills, and what would most help drive and inform our instruction from which reading curriculum should we be using? How should we group kids for intervention? Which interventions are most effective? What are the skills we need to focus on? I think that, like you said, and then dial it back and only get those assessments that answer those critical questions that drive instruction and lead to student improvement. Who doesn't want that? No one.
So our mission at Pivot and Core is to partner with educators to design and implement solutions to their greatest challenges in achieving educational justice. And so, as you can tell from these conversations, we're deeply committed to improving teaching and learning for students. And both of our organizations have 20 years of expertise working with districts and schools to support systems, to support delivering curriculum implementation and services aligned to high quality English language arts and math instructional materials.